National Electrical Code Section 334.10(2) states that where the building is of a type not covered elsewhere in this chapter, the wiring method shall be of a type approved for general use in accordance with Article 300. National Electrical Code Section 334.12(1) states that wiring in dwelling units shall comply with the requirements of chapters 1 through 4. Based on these code sections, it appears that Romex, also known as non-metallic sheath cable, is generally approved for use in assisted living complexes, nursing facilities, or apartments, since they often meet the requirements of a dwelling unit under Section 334.12(1). An inspector might have concerns about using Romex above drop ceilings due to potential damage or exposure to moisture. However, its use should be permissible if certain conditions are met. Firstly, accessibility. The drop ceilings must be accessible for maintenance and repairs. Secondly, protection from damage. The Romex must be protected from physical damage and moisture using methods such as conduit or rigid metal raceways. Thirdly, fire resistance. The Romex must be enclosed in fire-resistant material where required by code, such as near firewalls. To resolve a disagreement with an inspector, one approach is to meet the inspector's conditions. Provide evidence that the drop ceilings are accessible and that the Romex is protected from damage and moisture. Another is to seek a second opinion. Consult with another qualified inspector or electrician to get their opinion on the matter. A third is to appeal the inspector's decision. Contact the local building code authority or authority having jurisdiction to appeal the inspector's decision. To avoid further issues, it is recommended to provide documentation and evidence to the inspector that the Romex installation meets all relevant code requirements and safety precautions. This could include calculations, drawings, and photographs. Now let's delve deeper into the specific requirements and considerations for Romex installations, particularly in environments like assisted living facilities. Understanding the nuances of the National Electrical Code, or NEC, is crucial for ensuring safety and compliance. Romex, while a common and cost-effective wiring solution, has limitations and specific installation guidelines that must be adhered to. The NEC provides detailed instructions on where and how Romex can be used, and it's important to consult the latest edition for the most up-to-date information. When considering Romex above drop ceilings, accessibility is a key factor. The NEC mandates that electrical wiring must be accessible for inspection, maintenance, and repairs. This means that the drop ceiling must be easily removable, allowing access to the wiring without damaging the ceiling or the wiring itself. If the drop ceiling is not easily accessible, alternative wiring methods that do not require such accessibility should be considered. Protection from physical damage is another critical aspect. Romex is relatively fragile and can be easily damaged by impacts, abrasion, or other physical stresses. In areas where there is a risk of physical damage, the Romex must be protected by conduit, raceways, or other suitable enclosures. The type of protection required will depend on the specific environment and the level of risk. For example, in areas where there is heavy foot traffic or where equipment is likely to be moved around, more robust protection may be necessary. Moisture protection is also essential. Romex is not suitable for use in damp or wet locations, as moisture can damage the wiring and create a safety hazard. If the area above the drop ceiling is prone to moisture, such as from leaks or condensation, the Romex must be protected by a waterproof enclosure or replaced with a wiring method that is suitable for wet locations. Fire resistance is another important consideration. In certain areas, such as firewalls or fire-rated assemblies, the NEC requires that electrical wiring be enclosed in fire-resistant materials. This is to prevent the spread of fire and to protect the integrity of the fire-rated assembly. If Romex is used in these areas, it must be enclosed in a fire-resistant conduit or raceway. In addition to these specific requirements, there are also general installation guidelines that must be followed. These guidelines cover topics such as wire size, ampacity, support, and grounding. It is important to consult the NEC for these guidelines and to follow them carefully. When working with electrical wiring, it is always important to prioritize safety. This means wearing appropriate personal protective equipment such as gloves and safety glasses, and following all safety procedures. It also means being aware of the potential hazards of electricity and taking steps to avoid them. If you are not comfortable working with electrical wiring, it is best to hire a qualified electrician to do the work. Now, let's consider the specific situation of an assisted living facility. These facilities often have a mix of residential and commercial spaces, which can complicate the wiring requirements. In the residential areas, such as individual apartments or living units, the wiring requirements are generally the same as for a typical dwelling unit. This means that Romex can be used in most areas, provided that it is installed in accordance with the NEC. However, in the common areas, such as hallways, dining rooms, and recreational areas, the wiring requirements may be different. These areas may be subject to more stringent codes and regulations, particularly if they are considered commercial spaces. In these areas, it may be necessary to use a different wiring method, such as conduit or metal-clad cable. It is important to consult with the local building code authority or authority having jurisdiction, or OJ, to determine the specific wiring requirements for each area of the assisted living facility. The AHA is the entity responsible for enforcing the building codes and regulations in a particular area. They can provide guidance on the interpretation of the codes and can help to resolve any disputes or disagreements. When dealing with an inspector, it is important to be respectful and professional. The inspector is there to ensure that the electrical work is done safely and in accordance with the codes. If you disagree with the inspector's assessment, it is important to present your case calmly and logically, providing evidence to support your position. If you are unable to reach an agreement with the inspector, you have the right to appeal their decision to the AHA. In summary, Romex can be used in assisted living facilities, but it is important to understand the specific requirements and limitations. The NEC provides detailed instructions on where and how Romex can be used, and it is important to consult the latest edition for the most up-to-date information. Accessibility, protection from physical damage, moisture protection, and fire resistance are all important considerations. It is also important to consult with the local building code authority or AHA to determine the specific wiring requirements for each area of the facility. Always prioritize safety when working with electrical wiring, and if you are not comfortable doing the work yourself, hire a qualified electrician. Let's also consider some additional points to further clarify the topic. Firstly, the term dwelling unit is defined in the National Electrical Code. It's important to understand this definition because the permissibility of Romex often hinges on whether space qualifies as a dwelling unit. Generally, a dwelling unit is a single unit providing complete and independent living facilities for one or more persons, including permanent provisions for living, sleeping, cooking, and sanitation. Secondly, regarding the inspector's concerns about moisture, remember that the environment above a drop ceiling can sometimes be surprisingly humid or damp, especially in certain climates or due to plumbing leaks. Therefore, even if the space doesn't appear wet, the inspector may be considering long-term exposure and potential condensation. Thirdly, when providing evidence to the inspector, consider using detailed photographs or videos to document the installation process. This can be particularly helpful in demonstrating how the Romex is protected from physical damage or moisture. For example, you could show how the Romex is secured to framing members to prevent sagging or how it's routed away from potential sources of moisture. Fourthly, the type of conduit or raceway used to protect Romex should be appropriate for the environment. For example, if the area is subject to corrosion, you should use corrosion-resistant conduit. Furthermore, ensure that all conduit and raceway fittings are properly installed and sealed to prevent moisture from entering. Fifthly, remember that electrical codes are constantly evolving. It's essential to stay up to date on the latest changes to the NEC and any local amendments. Subscribing to industry publications or attending training courses can help you stay informed. Sixthly, consider the long-term maintenance of the electrical system. When installing Romex above a drop ceiling, think about how future maintenance or repairs will be performed. Ensure that the wiring is easily accessible and that there is enough slack in the wires to allow for adjustments or replacements. Seventhly, if the inspector is concerned about the potential for fire spread, you might consider using fire-rated Romex. This type of cable is designed to resist the spread of fire and can provide an additional layer of protection. Eighthly, when appealing an inspector's decision, be prepared to present your case clearly and concisely. Gather all relevant documentation, including code references, product specifications, and installation photographs. Be respectful and professional, and be willing to listen to the inspector's concerns. Ninthly, always document everything. Keep records of all inspections, permits, and approvals. This documentation can be invaluable if there are any future questions or disputes. Tenthly, consider using a cable management system to organize the Romex above the drop ceiling. This can help to prevent the wiring from becoming tangled or damaged and can make it easier to access for maintenance. Cable ties, J-hooks, or other cable supports can be used to keep the wiring neatly organized. 11thly, ensure that all electrical boxes are properly supported and secured. Electrical boxes should not be supported solely by the Romex wiring. Use appropriate mounting hardware to secure the boxes to framing members or other structural elements. 12thly, pay attention to the ampacity of the Romex wiring. The ampacity is the maximum amount of current that a wire can safely carry. Ensure that the Romex wiring is properly sized for the load that it will be carrying. Consult the NEC for ampacity tables and earthing factors. 13thly, when running Romex through holes in framing members, protect the wiring from abrasion by using grommets or bushings. This will prevent the sharp edges of the holes from damaging the insulation on the Romex wiring. 14thly, be aware of the potential for electromagnetic interference or EMI. Romex wiring can be susceptible to EMI from other electrical equipment. If EMI is a concern, consider using shielded Romex or routing the wiring away from potential sources of interference. 15thly, when connecting Romex wiring to devices or equipment, use approved connectors and fittings. Ensure that the connectors and fittings are properly tightened to provide a secure and reliable connection. 16thly, always test the electrical system after completing the installation. Use a multimeter or other testing equipment to verify that the wiring is properly connected and that there are no shorts or ground faults. 17thly, consider the impact of the installation on the overall building design. Ensure that the wiring is routed in a way that does not interfere with other building systems, such as HVAC or plumbing. 18thly, be aware of the potential for future changes or renovations. When installing Romex wiring, think about how future changes or renovations might affect the electrical system. Leave enough slack in the wiring to allow for adjustments or additions. 19thly, consider using a surge protector to protect sensitive electronic equipment. Surge protectors can help to prevent damage from power surges or spikes. 20thly, always follow the manufacturer's instructions when installing Romex wiring or related equipment. The manufacturer's instructions provide detailed information on the proper installation and use of the product. By carefully considering these additional points, you can help to ensure that your Romex installation is safe, compliant, and reliable. Remember to always consult the NEC and local codes for the most up-to-date information and requirements.